Hello, so I just thought I'd do a video discussing the two of my novels, Void Around Sunlight and The Glass Moon. They are two of the longer novels that I have published, with The Glass Moon being an actual novel at around 150 to 140 something pages. And I just thought I'd do a video discussing some of the ideas around them and some of the inspirations and some of the cut scenes from them. This is going to be a bit of a longer video than I usually do. This is going to be a bit more of an in-depth video. So I'm going to start with the easier of the two books to discuss about, which is The Glass Moon. I wrote this initially to be less philosophical and less reliant on the sort of heavy abstract concepts and more sort of a fantasy tale with elements of philosophy in it. I was trying to I wouldn't say I was trying to commercialize it, but I was just saying that I was trying to produce a work that was accessible to a larger audience. I suppose it's quite similar, but yeah, the story revolves around a man called Edgar Atlas who is on his deathbed, and he is offered essentially by a doctor a whimsical offering of living on the moon instead of dying on Earth. And at first he doesn't take it seriously, and then he kind of does. And then he finds out that she's not even a doctor that anyone recognizes. And then he begins to realize that there's something ethereal about the whole thing, and he accepts her offer, and he is taken to the moon, where he finds out that he is to be a successor. He's being almost built up to be a successor to the moon, and the moon itself has grown very ill, very tired, and watching humanity has sort of taken its toll throughout the years, and the moon needs someone to take its place, and Edgar Atlas is to hold up to be the new guardian and essentially hold up the celestial skies, much like Atlas did. Hence why I called him Edgar Atlas. The book, the inspiration behind the book was an Apollo mission that went wrong, where they crashed a lunar module into the surface of the moon and it rang like a bell. That actually happened. And another inspiration that I had for the video was for the book was the moon every year recedes slightly away from Earth, and I wanted to kind of almost put like a human meaning towards it rather than just like a gravitational physics meaning. I wanted to imply that it's receding away from Earth because it's losing its strength, it's dying, and it needs someone to take its place before it recedes so far away that it loses orbit around the Earth. And I really enjoyed writing The Glass Moon. I spent a few years writing it. I wrote it when I was 19 and I didn't publish it till I was 26, so I spent quite a few years writing it. As you can see, it's a bit lengthier than I usually write things. I usually explore grandiose concepts in the form of a novella, but in this case, this one was a short novel or just about a novel. With The Glass Moon specifically, I really wanted to explore it without getting too philosophical about it. This idea of guardianship, of what sort of humans aspire to, of what they look up to, we all look up to the moon. Almost every human that can see has looked up to the moon at some point, and the moon is essentially all of our guardians. It's our natural satellite. It's in our orbit, and it's what illuminates the night sky, and it's what the sun reflects from. And the sun obviously gives us all energy, and the sun is obviously a vital part of human existence, as is the moon. It controls the tides, and it controls even emotions. On a full moon, people are more likely to be erratic and emotional. The moon is played by the form of a woman called Colette. Edgar actually doesn't realise until the end of the book that he names Colette. He guesses her name and he thinks he got it right because she says he was right, but he essentially named her. Now, the reason she is a woman in this is because the moon essentially isn't a human. It's like a ethereal entity, but it will play the role of whatever's most appealing to the human that it is trying to make it the successor, which in Edgar's case is a woman called Colette. That was quite an interesting element. There's also a lot of references in the book of characters who are referenced to the moon. Like there is a Japanese character called Mr. Tsuki, which is Japanese for moon. There is his old flame, which was called Selena, or Celine. I can't remember. It's been a while since I wrote this book, and a long time since I read it. But yeah, and essentially it was the sort of like hint that Colette had always been around and she'd always been guiding Edgar in these different forms of humans that he hadn't actually realised. And this was essentially the premise that I had around the Glass Moon, and I did really enjoy writing it. Um, so this was the Glass Moon. Feel free to check it out. Now I'm going to move on to the Void Around Sunlight, which is a bit, although less pages, is a lot more of a meatier book, as it's heavily based within philosophy and heavily based within this postmodernistic abstract idea of a god dementia or a Boltzmann brain. A Boltzmann brain is a scientific experiment or a thought experiment created by an individual called Boltzmann, and he essentially said it is more plausible that a singular brain convincing itself it exists an entirety of existence would become a reality than an entire universe with billions and trillions of individual brains with consciousness. He said that it's more parsimonious for a Boltzmann brain to exist than the entire universe, essentially. And this is what it was based on. It was based on this collective mind, this God mind, this Godhead. And I didn't want to just write a book about the hive mind because I felt like there was already a very good short story written about the hive mind, and it was by Andy Weir, I think, and it was called something like The Egg. And it's very interesting. I'd highly recommend reading it. I did a lot of research on hive minds before I wrote this book. I looked into Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness, which is not essentially, it's not a hive mind, but it's more sort of in the synchronicity kind of realms. But I did a lot of look at the physics, like the Boltzmann brain thought experiment. I looked into Isaac Bentov. I looked into Andy Weir's The Egg. I did post a blog post where I discussed my deep thoughts and my research on it, and sort of gave like a brief overview of some of the stuff I found. Julian James he's a Princeton psychologist, and he discussed the bicameral mind, which is essentially that humans, before we developed the ability to speak to ourselves, we were commanded by a God voice. We had two sides of our brain, and one was commanded by a God voice, and that's why we would treat the dead as if they were still alive, because we didn't understand the concept of consciousness losing itself. And it actually plays into history quite well. Like Socrates had a daemon that used to speak to him, and if you read Troy, they often reference God speaking to them and God voices. There's a lot of references to God voices, and Julian James essentially said that this was proof of the bicameral mind. I think I'm saying bicameral right. But yeah, I didn't want to just explore a hive mind. I wanted to explore the idea of the mental health of the hive mind, and I felt like that's what would separate Void Around Sunlight from just a book about the hive mind, would be this idea of giving the hive mind a parasite, an illness that was going to push it to a level of like dementia or the abstract. It was like a postmodernist, like we live in a time where everything's like the classical structures of society are becoming more and more abstract, and we're sort of acknowledging the social constructs behind existence. And I wanted this to sort of play as a proverbial way into this hive mind. And the hive mind realizes this. It realizes it's been infected by a parasite, and to eradicate it, it creates one final war to inspect all three of its primary acts. The void, which is the evil's a bad word for it, but let's say evil, and then sunlight, which is like the best, the good, and then around, which is kind of the grey in between, but it also serves as like my sort of hearkening to Dante's Divine Comedy of Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise, as the hive resides within Paradise, much like God did it in Dante's Inferno. Not Inferno, Dante's Divine Comedy. Oh, I suppose he resided in all three of the acts of it. But I wanted the man. The book plays through three characters. The final being the hive. The first being the man, who is supposed to be representative of sort of mankind and the evil of man. That's why he resides within the void. And then the purgatory is the muse to humanity, who resides within space, waiting for the dawn of humanity to begin. He sort of exists within this this purgatory of lifeless existence, where he can marvel at great nebulas, stars, and all the wonders of the universe, but they're not conscious, so he never feels truly connected to them. And in this, billions of years of waiting for humanity to begin, he grows almost insane, and he begins to hate time and hate his creator. And the hive itself is just out to identify the parasite, and then identify how to act, how to solve the idea of its own mental illness, how to solve itself, which then leads to the hive to introspectively inquire if there could be anything that could live outside of itself. If God created everything, then who created God? It kind of harkens back to that almost childlike question that we ask. Well, at least I asked, because I was brought up Christian. I'm not Christian anymore, by the way, but it's a very strong theological question. If there's a creator, then who created the creator? Which is the kind of question that I tried to answer within this book, albeit very ambitious. I did try and answer it, and I came up with two strong theories. Two theories that I felt were strong enough to put inside the book, which are at the end, where the hive begins to introspectively inquire what could have possibly led to this parasite, and whether or not anything could possibly exist outside of it. And the intention of the final war was to wipe the slate clean. It was essentially eradicating its creations. It was cutting loose the strings of the puppets that had been playing the play with. Hence why the Shakespearean quote, "All the world's a stage," is a very strong quote within this book, and it's a quote that I really wanted to emphasize through character Angelica, who becomes increasingly relevant. At first she's not named, she is merely a child scampering through the streets during the war, but towards the end she becomes a more and more prominent character and has more and more sort of significance to the characters within inside the book. Now, I've decided to make the man in the book a serial killer, because I felt like I'd read a lot of very dark non-fiction and some fiction to get into the right. I wanted this book to be as authentic as I possibly could when it came to all three of the purgatory, the void, and the sunlight. I didn't want to sort of I don't know how to say it, skip dodge on any of them. I didn't want to sort of wing it. I wanted to really just have a level of knowledge, and even if I didn't use a lot of that knowledge, I just wanted to have it there, so when I wrote it felt authentic. It felt like I was really describing things that I'd read from accounts. I read Elie Wiesel's Night. I read a book about a doctor who worked with Joseph Mengele in Auschwitz, the Rwandan genocide, Unit 731, the rape of Nanking. I read a lot of very dark media, which wasn't particularly beneficial to my mental health, if I'm honest. It was a lot to take in for a long time, but I felt like I really just needed to write and just make the void a true representative of the void. I didn't want to write the void and it wasn't the void, it needed to be the void. And I knew with the sunlight, I couldn't possibly describe the sunlight, because we can identify with the most evil of evil because we've seen it, and there's historical context and there's historical evidence of this. But with the sunlight, it's this abstract concept of divinity almost. And you can say there's like sunlight and human good, which there is, and there's beautiful things, and there's as evil as humans can be, they can be equally as beautiful. But I needed the sunlight to be the divine creator's level of sunlight, which is why it almost enters the realms of abstract when the creator comes. And that was a very hard scene for me to write, because I had to write the physical description of essentially the creator itself, the architect of the universe, and what it could look like, how it would present itself, and what kind of existence it would reside in, without just plagiarizing like a theological or ideological religion, or anything that already existed. I wanted it to be as original as I possibly could. The Purgatory was probably the funnest part to write, and I actually used a lot of an old book that I wrote that explored a being stuck in the purgatory of the universe. So that came in very handy, and I rejigged it a lot and reworked it, and obviously matured it to where I am now. And I'm very proud of The Void Around Sunlight. It's a book where I really felt like I didn't pull any punches. I didn't commercialize. It's not a particularly good word to use, but I didn't commercialize anything. I really just let myself loose on this, and really just let myself just have fun with it, write as crazy as I could, write as crazy as I wanted to, give it all the kind of philosophical grandeur and authenticity, and do a lot of research before I wrote it, and really just give the story the kind of shot that I felt like it deserved, and the shot that I felt like would differentiate it from a lot of other books. Um, I'm very proud of it, and it's got some good reviews. And honestly, every review that I get that is good, it really, really makes my day, because this is what being a writer is about. Is it's about people reading your work and finding something of them, that they can enjoy or they can think about, or that maybe even inspires them to write something. And this is what it's all about. And honestly, the fact that even one person's read this book outside of me, it still blows my mind. So the fact that it's got quite a decent amount of attention recently, and it's honestly, I'm almost like humbled. And I saw on TikTok that I had 40 followers, and I'd only just downloaded TikTok, and 40 people are interested in me, and it's like it's almost an abstract concept within itself for me. I can't imagine 40 people being interested in my books, and I've received some beautiful, beautiful reviews on this book, and on The Glass Moon. The Glass Moon's had some beautiful reviews, and every review is beautiful, even if it's good or bad, because the human mind itself is beautiful. It's evil and it's good, and it can be social constructs. It can be an abstract, or it can be classical. It can be whatever it wishes to define itself. The brain itself named itself, but it is inherently ethereal, and I felt like that was the point I was trying to make within Void Around Sunlight. And it's really nice to see other brains. Not that I think we are a part of a hive mind, but it's nice to see other brains just think about my own words and my own brain's sort of external bleeding onto paper, and just to see them talk about it, and to have reviews about it, and just even have comments on quotes that get put up and stuff like that. It's just, and like even just have someone debate about it, and even if they're trying to disprove it, just to have someone put their thought into it, and it's just to see work, my artistic endeavours appreciated, be it good or bad, or the purgatory in between, the void around sunlight. It is truly a void around sunlight to enjoy. So I hope this video, although it's very long, and I don't blame anyone for not watching it this far, but I hope someone enjoyed something from it, and hopefully if you've read the books, hopefully it sheds some light on some things. I will make some more long videos like this. I usually make them short because I heard, or I read on a website, that people have shorter attention spans now. So I try and make my videos quick so people don't get bored. But I felt like I needed to do a long video on these two books, because a lot of work went into them, and I just felt like it would be interesting for people who like them to hear about it. So thank you very much.